All right, this is Chapter 2, Lesson 1, Solve Equations with Rational Coefficients. All right, so we're starting a brand new chapter. This chapter is all about solving equations with one variable, okay? So we got a couple of vocabulary words we want to kind of refresh in our memories. So the first one is this first box right here, okay? And it says two numbers with a product of 1, such as 3/4 and 4/3 are called blank or blank blank. Okay, so in those blanks, in the first blank, you're going to write reciprocals. All right, 1 second, let me adjust this real fast so I have a little bit more room to write. Okay. Reciprocals, so that goes in the first one. Or in the other two blanks, you're going to write multiplicative inverses. So multiplicative inverses, okay? So reciprocals, multiplicative inverses. So we have a couple of properties that we're gonna look at. The first property is the inverse property of multiplication. So in words, this says the product of a number and its multiplicative inverse is 1. So basically, if you multiply a number by the reciprocal, you get 1. Okay, so you can see this example. I have 7/8 times 8/7. Okay, now the reason this works is you can either cross simplify, 8 and 8 cross simplify, and 7 and 7 cross simplify, or you can multiply it out. 7 times 8 gives you 56. 8 times 7 gives you 56. 56/56 is 1. Okay. It works for negative numbers too. Both have to be negative. Remember, a negative times a negative equals a positive. Okay. In symbols, A/B times B/A equals 1, where A and B cannot be 0. Excuse me. Because if A or B equals 0, then you're dividing by 0 and it just doesn't work. Okay. And remember, in math world, dividing by 0 is no-no. All right, the other one I want to look at is solving equations with decimal coefficients. So in the equation 3.15 equals 0.45n, the coefficient n is a decimal. To solve an equation with a decimal coefficient, I divide each side of the equation by the coefficient. So I'm dividing it by 0.45 because that's the coefficient. That's what's in front of the n. That's what's attached to the n. Right now they're being multiplied. So remember, the opposite of multiplication is division. So I divide both sides by 0.45 because I want to get the n by itself. That's the whole goal. All right. Our next box down here says the numerical factor of a term that contains a variable is called the blank of the variable, okay? In that blank, you're going to write coefficient. Okay? So, I have a little example here. So I have coefficient. Coefficient is the 3. So that's the coefficient. And then I have x is my variable. Okay. Remember, a variable can be any sort of symbol. So any sort of symbol, letter, anything like that can be a variable. Coefficient is the number out in front of the variable. Okay, coefficients Only work if they're attached to the variable. So they're multiplied or divided by the variable. All right, multiplied by the variable. So in the equation, 3/4 C equals 18. The coefficient of C is a rational number. To solve an equation when the coefficient is a fraction, I multiply each side by the multiplicative inverse of the fraction. So remember, I want to get C by itself. So in order to get C by itself, I want to make 3/4 into 1. In order to do this, I multiply both sides by the reciprocal. So I multiply this by 4/3 and the 18 by 4/3. So let's look at some examples. Example number 1, okay? So it says solve 3/4 C equals 18, check your solution. So again, I multiplied by my reciprocal, 4/3, 4/3. I multiplied both sides, okay? This cancels, all of this cancels and becomes 1, okay? Then I can multiply. You can either multiply straight through or you can cross simplify. Here they cross simplified. They've realized 3 could go into 18. 3 becomes 1. 18 divided by 3 gives you 6. So this is 6. This is 1. Now I multiply straight across. 4 times 6 gives me 24. 1 times 1 gives me 1. So I get 24 over 1. Okay? You can always double check your answer by plugging this back in for your variable. 3/4 times 24 will eventually give you 18. Okay? So that's a check. All right, let's look at number 2. Number 2 says solve 1 1/2 S equals 16 1/2. Check your solution. Okay. So the first thing I want to do is I want to change 1 1/2 to a mixed number. So I multiply 2 times 1, which gives me 2, plus 1 gives me 3. So I have 3 over 2. So I get 3/2 S equals, and I change 16 1/2 to an improper fraction. 2 times 16 gives me 32, plus 1 gives me 33. Okay, now I multiply by the multiplicative inverse or the reciprocal. So 3/2 I multiply by 2/3. This all cancels and becomes 1. So this becomes 1. So all this cancels out, goes away. I'm left with 2/3 times 33/2. Again, I cross simplify. 2 becomes a 1 because it cross simplifies with that. This 3 becomes 1 because 33 becomes 11. Okay? 1 times 11 gives me 11. 1 times 1 gives me 1. So I have S equals 11. Okay? Once you're done, you can plug it back in to see if it works. So I can plug 11 back in for my S value and see if it works. So 3/2, 3 times 11 would give me 33 over 2, which does give me 16 1/2. Okay? All right, number 3 says solve 3.15 minus 0.45 n. Okay? Check your solution. So, this is a decimal, okay? In order to figure this out, I look at where my n value is, my variable. Pink for variables, okay? So here's my n value. I look at what's attached to it. 0.45 is attached to it. I'm multiplying here, so I want to do the opposite of multiplication, which is division. I divide both sides by 0.45. When I do that, 0.45 divided by 0.45 becomes 1, so this cancels, becomes 1. So I have n on this side. 3.15 divided by 0.45 gives me 7. So I get 7 equals n. I can plug it back in. 0.45 times 7 will give me 3.15. So my solution does work. Okay. Next one I have is number 4. So Latoya's softball team won 75% or 18 of its games. define a variable, then write and solve an equation to determine the number of games the team played. Okay. So the first thing that it asks me to do is determine a variable. Make sure you follow all directions, all right? So Latoya's softball team won 18 games, which was 75% of the games played. So we're going to let N represent the number of games played. It doesn't have to be N, it can be any variable that you want, but you have to tell me what the variable means. So in this case, N means the number of games played. Okay? We write and solve an equation. So 0.75, we changed the percent to a decimal. 0.75 times N equals 18. We know that 75% of the total games played equals 18. Okay, so that was what they had stated in the original problem. Now I have 0.75, I can divide by that. 18 divided by 0.75 gives me 24. So Latoya's softball team played 24 games. All right. So now you have a couple of try it problems on page 41. There's your try it problems. Okay, go ahead, pause the video, try them out. When you're done, come back, unpause the video, and we will go over the answers together. All right. Now that you have tried the try it problems on your own, let's look at them together. The first one is letter A. Letter A states 1/5 x equals 12. Well, this is a fraction, so I want to multiply by the reciprocal. The reciprocal of 1/5 is 5 over 1. So I multiply 5 over 1 times 1/5 x equals 12 over 1 times 5 over 1. Okay? This cancels, becomes 1. So I'm left with x. 12 times 5 gives me 60 over 1, which is really just 60. Letter B says -2/9 d equals 4. Okay. Again, dealing with a fraction, the reciprocal of -2/9 is -9/2. Okay. I remember I want to get a positive 1. So -9 over 2 times -2 over 9d equals 4 times -9 over 2. These cancel, become 1. I'm left with d. Okay, I can simplify over here. 2 becomes 1. 4 becomes 2. 2 times -9 is -18. All right, letter C. I have 15 equals 5/3 n. It doesn't matter what side of the equation it's on. Okay, remember we're balancing things. Whatever I do to one side, I have to do to the other side. So I still have a fraction here, which means I still need to multiply by the reciprocal. Okay, the reciprocal of 5/3 is 3/5. So 3/5 times 15 equals 5/3 times 3/5 n. This cancels. So I'm left with n on this side. The 5 and the 15, I can simplify. 5 becomes 1, 15 becomes 3. 3 times 3 gives me 9. Letter D. I have -24 equals -6/7 p. Okay, again, -6/7 reciprocal is -7 over 6. So -7 over 6 times 24 equals -7 over 6 times -6 over 7p. These cancel. I can simplify. 6 becomes 1. 24 becomes 4. -7 times 4. I'm sorry, times -4. This was a -24. Gives me a positive 28 equals p. Okay. Letter E, I have 4 and 1/6 equals 3 and 1/3. Okay. I want to change both of these to improper fractions. Okay. 6 times 4 is 24, plus 1 is 25. So 25 over 6 equals 3 times 3 is 9. 9 plus 1 is 10. 10 thirds C. I'm multiplying by the reciprocal, which is 3 over 10. Okay. This cancels. I'm left with C, which I can simplify stuff. 3 goes in once, 6, 2. Okay. I can also simplify the 10 and the 25, both divisible by 5. 10 divided by 5 gives me 2. 25 divided by 5 gives me 5. So I have 5 halves. When I change that back to a mixed number, 2 goes into 5 2 times, and I'm left with 1 over 2. So either 5 halves or 2 and 1/2, either would be correct answers. Okay. Then I have F. So I have -9 and 5/8. W equals 108. Okay. So this is a mixed number. I want to change it to an improper fraction. 8 times 9 is 72. 72 plus 5 is 77. So I have -77 over 8W. Okay, and I want to multiply that by the reciprocal, which is -8 over 77 equals 108 times -8 over 77. Okay. This simplifies with this, so I'm left with W. Okay. And I got a couple other things going on here. Okay. Okay, I cannot simplify 108 and 77, it looks like. So I need to multiply 108 times 8 gives me 864 over 77, and it is negative because of the -8. Okay, this simplifies. 77 goes into 864 11 times. Okay, and I have 17 left over, so 17 77ths, and it is negative, so -11 and 17 77ths. You could also leave it as -864 over 77. Okay, either is correct. All right, then I have letter G. Letter G is 1 and 7/8 Y equals 4 and 1/2. Again, changing everything to improper fractions. 8 times 1 is 8, plus 7 is 15, so I have 15/8 Y. 2 times 4 is 8, plus 1 is 9, 9/2. I'm multiplying by the reciprocal, which is 8 over 15. Okay, these will cancel. I'm left with Y equals, I can simplify some stuff. 2 becomes 4, 3, 5, so I get 12/5. 5 goes into 12 2 times with 2 left over, so I get 2 and 2/5. Okay. Letter H, I have 4.9 equals 0.7t. Okay, so this is solving an equation with decimal coefficients. Okay, so my coefficient is the 0.7. So I'm going to divide by 0.7. 4.9 divided by 0.7 gives me 7. So 7 equals t. Okay, you write t equals 7, 7 equals t. Either way, it's the same answer. All right, letter I, negative 1.4 m equals 2.1. The coefficient, negative 1.4 m, so I divide both sides by negative 1.4. 2.1 divided by negative 1.4 is negative 1.5. The other letter I, apparently I have two letter I's. I have negative 5.6k equals negative 12.88. Negative 5.6 is the coefficient. Divide both of them by negative 5.6. So negative 12.88 divided by negative 5.6 gives me 2.3. So k equals 2.3. Negative divided by negative gives me a positive. Then the last one, I have J. Paula has read 70% of the total pages in a book. She is reading for English class. Okay, Paula has read 84 pages. Define a variable, then write and solve an equation to determine how many pages are in the book. Okay, so I first want to define a variable. Okay, I'm going to use P for pages. So P is the total pages Paula read. Okay, you don't have to use P. You can use any variable you want. Make sure you tell me what the variable stands for. Okay, so that's defining a variable. Then I'm going to write and solve an equation to determine how many pages are in the book. So she read 70% of the total pages in the book, right? So 70% is 0.7 or 0.70. That's the total number of pages. P, and we know she has read 84 pages. That's the percentage of pages she's read. So I have 0.7p equals 84. I divide both sides by 0.7. Okay, 84 divided by 0.7 is 120. So there are a total of 120 pages in the book. Okay, and that is the end of lesson 1.